Hey guys, we're here to talk about Bit Heroes Connect. I'm Atta.
I'm Raphael.
And I'm PY.
So this is sort of my baby, despite this guy starting. I'm kidding. But yeah, so this, for context in the capstone sense, I'm a fourth year student. PY is in third year. Ed is in second year. Work on this project started in September for 4 months, just as myself, and then we got funding, and then I could take them on as hire, so we could actually make a game. Yeah, so I mean, so you guys just like jump in as soon as you see it fit. The goal of this project in general was just how do we make sort of a platform for community engagement that the York Regional Police could use? Because the current system is still like go into a school, talk at kids, like give them a pamphlet or something, tell them not to do anything bad, and obviously that just doesn't work. So I actually got a bunch of cool tech from HP. They came in and showed off some cool stuff. If you want to go like, well, I mean, there's that, yeah, but there's the other stuff over there. They came in and they brought a whole bunch of stuff. So this is like a mixed reality headset, and despite the name, mixed reality just means there's sensors on it. But the sort of, I'm going to be that person that puts everything on at once. But the cool thing is, in our context, is, okay, Ad is going to put this on. It's that one of the pieces of equipment that we got is a VR backpack. And the thing that's nice about it is that it's essentially portable VR. And in the current year, 2018, that is new, and that's not something that's been done before. So what we got essentially is portable power and a mixed reality headset. So sort of what I ended up drafting as like a design proposal is, if we use the York Regional Police as superhero characters, because they have superhero characters to help with this community engagement stuff, you integrate that and the mixed reality headset into sort of the character design, so that now that they're at the school, you can play stuff. So in a more technical sense, the backpack acts as a server. Everyone connects with mobile devices.
We have
a million mobile devices. And it's funny because the camera right now is actually on a pile of tablets. And everything sort of works together. So there's like a few basic concepts like pillars. Just we want teamwork, progression, and human-human interaction. Those are sort of the core pillars of the game. And not without reason, the point of human-human interaction in this sense is we want officers and children to have points of contact, and we want children to have points of contact with their peers so that they're working together, and that falls into the other one. The progression mechanics are really just a way to make the game work in like a 15-minute setting, because this is sort of at the start of their talk. You know, you go into a school and you're going to talk about anti-bullying or some other thing. This is where you start, so that that progression mechanic is very important, so that you get a sense that you actually did something in 15 minutes. So it's not like, oh, I barely learned how to play a game. It's like, no, I've played the full game. I've seen the full range. And the progression mechanics sort of help with that. So you get that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the gist of it. Did I forget anything in that sense?
I think that's pretty much like the gist of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to do a couple of things. It's a fairly elaborate setup. I mean, I'm just going to...
There's a lot of stuff, yeah.
So it's front facing, so... so sort of... I just flipped the camera. Okay, so... so we got this, right, the VR backpack. It's hooked up to that TV. We got all these tablets that we were talking about. And now I actually have to like, play and set everything up.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try and see if this works, because we're probably just gonna have to like thoroughly edit this game. So we're just gonna start with a bit of gameplay and talk about what we're doing, and we're not gonna focus about this too much because we're just gonna switch over.
Yeah. Are you recording?
Oh, that's a good question. I was recording. Screen was recording.
Oh, make sure you change the screen recording settings.
Is there settings?
Yeah.
Great. I love having to go in and edit all of this stuff after.
I saw it.
Why are there settings?
Settings. Why didn't you tell me? I just told you
Okay.
when it was important. So resolution. Make it screen resolution or 1080p. You just made it lower.
Yeah, isn't that a good thing? I don't want to die.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's
Then
good
you
where
have
it
your
is.
bit rate and your your frame rate. If you want to make it higher or lower or whatever.
Frame rate.
This is the opposite of ATA. It says like 15 bit rate. I got you.
Okay.
Quality.
So, all right, so we're gonna start. Start now. Okay. So we're gonna see if this works. Still.
So wait for me.
So we have 0 people. Oh, I know why. When you don't. Okay, so I guess while I'm doing this, I'm going to talk about some of the stuff. The way it works is everyone connects to the same Wi-Fi network as the VR backpack. And it's really nice because all we need is the same network. We don't need anything else. So we actually, I went on the wrong one, didn't I? So all we need is to be on the same local network. And that makes things easy because you don't actually need anything else to be able to do this. So basically, in our pile of equipment that we have beside us right now, we have a little Wi-Fi router with our own wireless network. So there's no internet, but everything sort of connects to that. So we're going to see if POI can get in, and if so, we'll be able to start. So the game's very simple, and we got a lot to talk about. We got the art style. I got a bunch of technical stuff, and then just in general the design, because the production of this game. Oh, are you going to be an assistant?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I think we're going to start and just talk as we go. You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. So the way it works is we get some network messages from the server. Oh, great. My I think we're gonna restart. Yeah, I need to calibrate my camera. Great. Why is the Windows key so far? Yes, if you can turn it around.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so this is probably the first thing we'll talk about then, is just that the setup is elaborate and complicated, and that is not useful. But the thing is, it is scalable. Sort of the gist of it being that you can go into a classroom and then play this game with 20 students or so. You can go into a gymnasium and have like 100 or 200 students and still play with them. And ideally, you could go to a large event. So they have Wii Day in Toronto, and this is something we would want them to play at so that they could go to an event. But that's like 18,000 people, so I'm just saying like, oh, 2,000 kids. If it can work with 2,000 kids, then great. The thing is, there's different roles that people take on. So as a kid, wait a second, I gotta go and calibrate my settings. So as a kid, you're just going to be playing the normal game, but as an officer, you actually have a role in that. There we go. You have a role in that you have to help out the kids when they need to, and we do that by providing charge. So are we all connected? Did you undo? Did you like quit and come
I
back?
did, yeah.
Okay, so let's all just quit and come back in. Jeez. All right.
So I'm in.
Okay.
ATA's in.
That is in. Why is
You're in.
No, you're in.
Oh, I'm good. Okay. Cool. All right, we can actually start playing for real this time. Okay, so this is upright. You guys ready?
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay. So we actually just hit a key and the server starts, and it essentially auto plays. So to start, it gives you a message. So I'm gonna read it. It says, collect bots around you to gain bits. The more bots you collect, the more bits you will make. So it's just basic incremental, right? You collect something, because you collect it, you're generating more. And it's just, it almost has no meaning beyond, it gives you as like a kid the opportunity to go around, find a thing, tap on it, and then tap on it a whole bunch, and then you collect a number. And so it starts where there's 3 phases. So in the initial phase, there's only one type of bot you can collect. In the second and third phase, there are more. And each phase unlocks a different kind that you can get. And those ones essentially just add a little bit of variety. Each round is about, I think it's 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The server is actually telling us like what we should strive to get, which last I remember wasn't balanced very well. So we're probably not going to be hitting this on our first round. Gets the general idea. And it's interesting, it's very simple. Kids actually tend to like it a lot. So now I'm out of battery. It's not like an actual phone thing. It's just a way to create an interaction with an officer. So in this case, PY is an officer.
So I am going to read Raf's code, and then I'm going to enter his code into my tablet, which is then going to recharge his device.
Yeah.
So 8746.
Yeah. And it's just creating a natural point of contact. We changed phase. So in the second phase, this is where we share. So it no longer really has anything to do with the officer, and it's more like a teamwork thing, right? So find a friend and enter their code. So if I put in 8421, we both get a message saying that I received this much, he got that much, and then it moves over. So in the second phase now, there's blue ones. Let's see. Oh, there's a green one. So each one, like each time you get one of like the next edition, if you will, they're harder to tap. So it requires more taps to get. Not that much, but enough to make it feel like it's worth more. A lot of what I was doing is actually, a lot of the game lies to you, but it does that with sort of purpose. Like, you don't actually need to really collect anything for any reason if you really felt you didn't need to. But the idea of like, hey, if you go collect things and you can help out, you know, United or Unity, that would be great. And it's fairly simple, right? Like, we want kids to be able to sort of just like drop in and play, and sort of get an idea of what's going on without too much difficulty. I'm really not doing so great.
How many points do you have? Yeah, you guys are still.
I'm at 79.
So another big problem that we actually had was figuring out, how to make a simple gameplay interaction for collecting these bots without overcomplicating it for the kids. So before the main design was using gestures to collect these bots, but that worked out. Like, we went to a playtest and we tried it out, and it turned out to be actually harder for some kids. Some kids understood it, but a lot of kids were having trouble doing this gesture. So what we actually opted out to do was just a simple tap mechanic where it would slowly decrease, very, very slowly decrease if you didn't tap. So it kind of had like a bit of challenge, but it wasn't really a challenge. It was kind of like fake challenge. It's just so that they felt like they were actually capturing something. And as you get to different bots and different colors, it gets harder to capture, but it's not really getting harder. It just feels harder. Mm-hmm. That was something that was an interesting challenge to figure out what worked for kids. Because, like, it was for kids 8 to 12, so it's kind of hard for us to know how that would work. Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting challenge to figure out and work around, but in the end, it turned out, like, it worked out what we opted out for.
Yeah. Like, the original concept was that each one of these little guys would actually sort of require a different gesture. They would essentially have like an emotion that you deal with differently. So like one of them might be like sleepy and you're just like trying to wake it up, and the other one might be angry and you're just trying to calm it down with gestures. But when we went to do it, for one, what we were using for it wasn't super friendly on sort of the gesture input and didn't have a lot of leeway. So we changed that to tapping, because once we did that, everything in the game was tapping. And that made it very simple, and there's no there's no learning curve beyond, I tap stuff and stuff happens, which was really useful, and sort of just being like, yeah, just tap it, and then people try and find all the different types of ways that they can tap faster. You get some people, they're like, I'm doing it with like a million fingers. And that's fine, like as long as people are sort of enjoying what they're doing. Yeah.
Another thing we actually added in after was the bot rarities. So in the beginning, finding these bots were kind of like linear, because you knew like every bot would have the same result. So they would all have, they would all give a set amount of bits. So there would actually be no mystery or excitement in collecting these bots. So something we added in afterwards is actually these rarity stars. So depending on how many stars there are, it gives you more bits or less bits. So this kind of created an interesting surprise for people to be like, oh, there's a bot, I wonder, how many bits I'm going to get from this bot, which actually worked out pretty well in the end and created some excitement.
Okay, so this phase right here, after you do 3 of each of those other phases, you have to transfer all of the points that you got. I think my favorite part is that to make it, because we had to make sure that everyone would be able to complete this. So whether or not you actually tap the progress, like, I don't know why I'm showing it there, because I have a feed, but whether or not you touch it, it will always complete. So like Ada and I basically show it because they don't have yours, but it finishes at the same time. Essentially, whether or not you do anything, you will be able to complete it within the allotted time. And that was intentional, and people don't know, and it's actually really good that they don't know, because it ensures that everyone's at the same point. If a kid taps really slow because they're tired or they don't want to tap, and somebody else is super eager to, it manages to have both of them have fun. And the thing is, it's very hard for them to know that that we're lying to them, essentially, because they're only really ever going to play this once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, right? It's a very rare game for them to play, right? Like, think how many times a police officer actually went to your school and talked to you, like twice, maybe 3 times. So in this case, and it's like, if the age range is 8 to 12, I think that's grades like 3 to 6 or 7. There's only so much in the way of like opportunities for that. And so it's not unreasonable to actually sort of just like fake it to make it work in all those scenarios. And so victory. We win.
Victory.
Yeah. And it's actually really cool. Everything's sort of in AR, so there's always a little bit of fun in just sort of messing around with stuff.
And that was an accident too.
Yeah, that's the best part.
We put particles, and then the camera moves, and then it turns out that the particles, whenever you move, you kind of move around the particles.
Yeah.
But then it kind of added a flavor of like, oh, it's an AR game, so we added it on the home menu and the victory menu.
Yeah. And sort of, and I mean, so one thing that we sort of haven't talked a whole lot about yet in terms of this like main gameplay loop is actually just, alright, let's stop this video. Yes, okay. Sort of one of the main things that we haven't really talked about is this main screen that's going on. So this is the view of the officers. So here's the thing. We have our mixed reality headset, which is a fancy term for augmented virtual reality, but not actual augmented reality. So we're in the process of acquiring, because all the equipment takes a million years, but a stereoscopic camera that we're going to put onto this so that you can actually see through kind of like normal AR. This is a part of the officer's uniform. And so when they're playing, the spectator screen shows off their view as they're actually walking around the space, because the VR backpack is on them, and so they can do that. And it kind of gives that sense of like, oh, this is what the superhero sees, and when you play the game, you get to see into their world and interact with them that way. And so that's sort of the main thing. It's just the theming in the context makes it more engaging because there's sort of like an extra bit to it. But the other thing that we didn't get time to implement would actually be like at the start we were thinking like, oh, we should have this like boss type thing, and then you're helping them out and transferring all your points at the end to help them defeat whatever that they can see on that screen. As well as other things like two things that didn't make it in to this prototype but are still part of like the core design is one is accessibility. Because you're going to school, you need everyone to be able to participate in this. And so the idea was the same mode that sort of PY was in, the role of like helping charge other people's devices. That would be something that children would be able to play as well, slightly different. Officers would be able to grant other people into that mode, but those people would not be able to grant other people into that mode. And the reason is actually for safety. We can't have anyone just going to that mode and being like, oh yeah, just come see me and charge your battery, because you don't want that weirdo that goes into that mode, stays at like the far end of the lot at a large event and like has kids go to them and then they're gone, right? Like that's a really important thing. And so only officers can do that for one. And the point of the mode is sort of that they can charge somebody else. But the idea is we want the other kids to come to them. Because if they're not going to be moving around or low mobility or whatever, they're tired maybe, right? Like you just want other kids to be able to come to them. But you still want them to have the incremental gameplay, which is not something that the officer gets. The officer only puts an input, right? Like to charge other people's devices. But what we do is like, okay, so you're going to charge this person, and then because of that, you sort of get like a percentage of their score in return. And so they get the incremental experience of seeing a number go up through that mechanic of charging other people. And so that way, whether or not you're collecting stuff or just helping up the charge, you get that gameplay experience. The other thing was having a moment of highlight with the Super Sharer character, which is not in, and sort of part of the reason there's a spectator screen. It's that we're going to have profiles that you would make for yourself, and that there was a special type of bot called like the gold bot or whatever color, that when you collect, essentially you get a prompt on your device that says like, hey, you caught like a super special whatever, go bring it to United or Unity or whatever the officer is. And then they would get to input a message kind of like the battery message, but that says like, oh, this person got like a gold whatever. And it gives everyone that's playing a bonus. And that's sort of to say like, hey, this person did something that's super cool and is helping everybody out, and you feel good because somebody else on your team is helping everyone. And then it would display that person's profile briefly, like 5-10 seconds, on the spectator screen with like a little fanfare and particles or whatever, to make them feel really special in that like 5, 10, 15 seconds. Say like, hey, you as an individual are also really cool, aside from like everyone as a team is really cool. And it just makes it like, oh, you got your one, your 15 minutes in the limelight or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, it's that kind of a moment, something that's special that says like, oh, that was really cool, and I want to come back to this because they're at different events doing different things as well. So that's sort of some of the things that didn't make it in.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing, though, about the spectator screen is that does seem to be the direction that mixed reality is going in. When I was at GDC, I went to a talk there's a Pac-Man HoloLens game that got made recently in the year 2018. That's actually like in theme parks now, and the thing is, it's 3 people playing different roles of Pac-Man. So I think it's like the pellet, like the fruits of cherry, and like Pac-Man, and they're like fighting ghosts or whatever, and like in a maze, but with HoloLens. So it's like a first-person perspective of the maze, and it's a 3-person game, but there is a spectator screen. They went to an obscene length to sort of route everyone's data back onto sort of like a server and combine it so that people playing could see what all 3 people were sort of doing in that space. and it was really important for them to make it a large social experience, because like sort of virtual augmented reality together is better when it's a social experience. And I personally think that's true, and it's kind of interesting that we both came to that conclusion, that the spectator screen, aside from the things that we just explained, were also for parents or other people at the event to be able to partake or understand what the experience is when they're sort of just not there but not playing. Because it's really hard to look over your kid's shoulder when they're playing AR. Ada had one of the playtests, a kid like grabbed a tablet and just like bolted.
Just ran off with the tablet.
Yeah, right? So it's like, but you still want those people to be part of the experience, and that's why the spectator screen is sort of part of the thing. But that's sort of like the general design. There's actually some really cool stuff in terms of art, because up until where I got, I was just being agnostic about the art. Like I wasn't making it anything particular, so that it sort of could fit anything, sort of like generic, but it wasn't actually defined. Like in December, I only had like a demo that was everything in one scene, and you could send some messages of like, oh, you tapped a thing, so numbers go up, and that was it. Yeah. But then PY came on, and then I think a week or two later, Ada came on. Yeah. For the art cell, and then they actually had to figure it out.
Yeah. So there was like server stuff all set up that Raph had, but it was like when I came on and when Ata came on, it was time to kind of figure out what the screens would look like and what the user experience would be like. So what was important for that was kind of like paper prototyping, building everything out, starting from the basics, not really getting too invested in all the elements, just making sure everything's blocked out, making sure we can kind of see what's going to be happening and then make some decisions based off of that. Because it's really easy when you have a paper screen and say, oh, I don't think this is the best layout for this screen, so instead of having to reorganize everything in your Illustrator file, you can just grab another piece of paper and kind of sketch out some ideas. And then from there, we went on to make all the wireframes for the screens on the computer, figure out what that looks like, and that became like a really strong base for kind of what the screens look like now. Yeah. Especially when you're under time constraints, you kind of rely on that stuff. So it's really important to be thorough from the beginning, so that when it comes time to like when there's time constraints, you don't have to worry about the design necessarily of the screens, because they've already been thought out. And for a game like this, it's pretty much all UI, user interface. So it was really good to have something to fall back on when we had questions or when we needed reference. But yeah, so that was that. Yeah. Figuring out the style was another thing. So
style was an interesting challenge. As first we had like super flat colors and more dull colors. It looked clean, it looked nice, but it didn't fit kids of 8 to 12 year olds. Like, it didn't look cool, right? We wanted something that would be like feel cool, feel techy. We wanted something that when a kid picked it up, they would be like, wow, this is like cool, right? Like for us, something that looks clean and nice is something that we like, but that's not something necessarily kids give importance to, and that was something interesting to work around and work with. Also, another thing was combining a 3D style with a 2D style that matched well together. So what we actually, for 3D, we actually went with voxel art, and for the 2D side, what we thought would match it very well was pixel art. So we kind of had pixel art UI with voxel art, and in the end, it actually came together really nicely. But that was an interesting challenge because we had to keep going back and forth between like lots of different design ideas, figure out how we can really make these two different styles mesh together well, figure out the colors,
Yeah. So one of the things, for instance, for the pixel art was, okay, so if voxel is for 3D assets, then pixel art is for 2D assets. But one of the things that was really important was to not have a retro style. Because that's not something that resonates with kids. That's something that resonates with people that are in their, mid-late 20s, 30s, right? And so what we ended up with was just like really nice poppy colors, and it's like it's pixel, it's chunky, but it wasn't like, oh, it looks like an old game. It's like, no, it's just like a modern chunky style. And the reason for voxels was because it's AR, we wanted something 3D, because 3D just looks better when it's in motion in AR than something 2D in the same context. But we wanted to be able to iterate on it really quickly, so we're like, okay, well, voxel art is like decent at iteration time, and it was free. So we went with that. And we were actually, I spent like a week on like a voxel importer that never got used. So I mean that was it, counting my chickens before or whatever.
Hey.
And that's fine, but that did end up being really good. Like when we were talking with Jonathan, who was our art mentor, a lot of good stuff came up, like how, like for kids, like they really don't care about style. Like you look at games like Minecraft, Roblox, Unturned.
Unturned, yeah.
Yeah, like these games look like trash if you compare them to most any other game, but that's not what they care. What they care about is the gameplay.
Yeah.
In our case, our gameplay is very simple, but you're only going to play it once, really. And so it sort of all worked out. The other thing, too, was we were almost trying to go for something that is nostalgic to kids of that age, but they don't know it's nostalgic yet. Like, they don't know that Minecraft and these other voxel-type games are nostalgic because they're not old enough to be, like, removed from those games yet and be able to look back on them. Like, it's still in their hands and they're still playing them. But that's something that ended up, I think, working pretty well. I know, Ada, when you were at the library and kids were playing, like, how, like, because of my crappy design, like, they didn't necessarily get some stuff right away, but they were having fun. They liked it, and it was interesting, and they were engaged in it without even knowing what the heck was going on. So that's pretty good. And then when we showed it off at Level Up, even then, like, most of the people that came by were, like, adults in their 20s or older. And you explain the idea of, like, oh, no, you know, this is for officers, this is what they're doing at YRP, and we want to go into schools and be doing something different. And everyone likes it for that sense. Like, I know one of the guys that we met at the airport coming back from GDC, like, we met him there, and it's, like, super simple. He's a level designer. But the thing is, you know, I was just talking about the game, and he's like, yeah, no, like, this is good. And it's good in the context of, like, this is something you play once, it's for kids of this age, and this is what the game's doing. And so that sort of experimental setting really helps make something that seems, like, less interesting as a game itself a lot more interesting than it really is.
I think another thing that was really important is the feedback. Since, like, kids, they don't really keep track of these numbers or what's happening or a lot of things, but once you give them a lot of feedback, like numbers popping up, you know, stuff exploding, lots of, like, cool things happening, they feel good about it. And that was something that we focused on. You know, the stars pop up, they spin, lots of particle effects. We really wanted to focus on that because stuff like that really makes kids excited and really gives them, you know, positive feedback right when they accomplish something. And that was something that they really liked, even if they didn't completely understand the gameplay in our playtest at the library, which we fixed a few of the things. But even though they didn't understand the core concept, they had lots of fun capturing these things because there was lots of feedback and lots of, you know, clear numbers popping up, clear, like, big things and cool things.
Even to that effect, when talking with Jonathan, he has kids that are fairly young. Yeah. And he was saying, like, as soon as you get a number that's, like, over 100 or, like, 1,000, like, it just means nothing to them anymore, right? Yeah. Which is something that's, like, super obvious, but wasn't really something I was thinking about when I started. I'm just like, oh, you see a number and it gets bigger, so you know, but it's harder. So hopefully by the age of 8, you know, they get a decent idea of, like, what a million is, because then the rest sort of makes sense in that context. But yeah, so in terms of feedback, definitely everything else is more important than the number. Yeah. I think the number just, again, because it's sort of more like a family setting, it kind of helps. For the parents, they'll totally understand, like, that part, but then the kid's totally just going to respond to, like, visual feedback in that sense.
Yeah. And the first time you play anything, you don't notice everything.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big thing. Like, we play games and we play them over and over, and we start to notice the little things. But if you're designing for a one-time, like one-off experience, it's different in the sense that your user won't notice everything right away because they're learning it or trying to figure out what's going on. And there's all these little things that we add that make it feel good, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a short experience, and the overall experience is what we're designing for.
And it sort of helps in that sense because it is like, in a lot of ways, this game is really basic and really simple. We worked on making it simple, but the mechanics themselves are fairly basic. Like it's AR, you tap on a thing, you punch in some code because QR didn't work, which was originally the intent, because that's like a no friction. You just move the camera over and you're done. I don't know where I was going with that, but
that it's simple.
Yeah.
It's approachable.
On the tech side, it's a little bit more complicated. Set up your data properly, kids. But one of the things is definitely just being able to iterate quickly. That was a giant bottleneck for the project for a long time, where I was like, oh no, like I remember in like my it was like second or third week of mentorship, and Andrew's like, so how are you going to debug your network? And I didn't actually think about it any further than that. I was just like, I'll figure it out. But that created like many nights of like, building making code, uploading it to two different repositories, making a new build, and running it, and not being able to see what the heck's going on. And then I got frustrated at one point, like 2 weeks before like level up. And I changed a method from protected to public, and that's all it took to make everything debuggable on one device, which is actually how we got sort of this build to be standalone. So that was definitely a good lesson, but the complexity in this project doesn't come from, there's some complex challenges in terms of design of like, how do you make something that's accessible for everyone? How do you make something that is engaging within 15 minutes that works for this age range, and you kind of keep having to cut things down to make them simpler. But in terms of tech, it was definitely the networking where I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and I certainly have a better idea now. But that's sort of one of the things where it's like, on the production side, it's definitely worth taking a bit of time and sort of like figuring that stuff out, because that bit me in the ass really hard at the end. I have a devlog on that too. I got a photo of me just dead. PY took. It's the best photo. Yeah, it's yeah, and that's the thing. So, and we still have stuff to do with this, where we're trying to get that stereoscopic video in for DigiFest in like 3 days. Yeah. So that'll be interesting too. Yeah, but I think that more or less covers the gist of it. Do you guys have any other comments?
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
It works. And kids like it. Parents like it too.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. So I would say it's successful.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely would not be able to have done it without these two.
Well,
it's true though. We made a game in like, Capstone is 8 months. It's not 8 months. It's like 6 months, really. And I basically had fuck all up until you two came on. I just had a scene with some code in it. So yeah, multiple mentors were impressed. Let me just say that.
Oh,
yeah,
that's good.
That our game was like one of the most polished. Yeah, so it feels good.
Paper prototype.
Feels good. So
way to go.
So here's actually one thing to sort of put this, I don't want to say in perspective, but one other thing that was interesting about this project was the sort of like the partner relationship, because there's tech from HP, so that's like a thing in and of itself. But then there's also relations with YRP, and that's probably the most interesting, is especially from their perspective, the fact that like this stuff, it just isn't happening. It's like not a normal thing. Is super exciting for them, and the fact that every time I go to them and like show anything off of like, oh hey, look, I got a thing that's moving. Oh look, I have like the network, the number goes up. Like they're super excited to see any of that. They're like, oh, it's fantastic, it's great. I can't wait to see it, like, you know, in its final iteration. And it's super encouraging to know that, like, because we're so used to just making like normal games, and if it's not like better than the rest, you sort of don't get recognition for it. But there's a lot of stuff happening right now where it's like you can find things that are like more meaningful. Like I don't want to say like a traditional game isn't meaningful, because it is, and especially if they're really good, it's meaningful to a lot of people. But there are like these other experimental things that are like immediately visible as something meaningful beyond sort of the fact that it's a game. It's like what it's actually doing. Because a lot of what we looked at is sort of like psychology and what it's promoting. And yeah, I don't know. So that's a cool thing. I don't know who's going to see this video, so I don't know if it's like, you should do this. But it was really nice because like we got more than our tuition's worth in equipment just for this project of technically one person. So that was definitely like a cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope other people get the opportunity to make things that aren't normal games, because it's kind of easy to do that. Like you can just like go outside and go to most any studio in the year 2018 and make like a normal game. So you can take the 8 months and do something weird and hopefully get paid a lot for it.
Yeah.
But yeah. Cool. Anything else?
No. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we don't know when people are actually going to see this, so there's probably going to be like Nick and Jose.
Hey, Nick and Jose.
Yeah. Hi.
Guys.
That's probably going to be them like immediately. But if somebody actually like looks at this in 10 years, that'll be interesting. Or 20 years. Or 50 years.
Wow. We should put this in that time.
Video encoding won't exist in 50 years. They'll have it on like some new fangled like tape.
Okay.
I'll hopefully have a mixtape by then.
Mixtape.
Yeah.
TY's gonna be a rapper by then. So.
All right, so I think that's the gist of it. Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, I had lots of fun.
Me too.
It was a great experience.
Yeah.
Did a lot of cool things.
It was. I mean, I'm sure for you guys it was better than me. It was a painful experience for.
There was some tiring moments. There was some.
But you weren't even there during like the strike. Like motivation at an all-time low. Before the strike, actually, not during the strike. During the strike, motivation went up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Right, I'll just end it there.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Goodbye, universe.